From Third World to First, Singapore and the Asian Economic Boom by Lee Kuan Yew. This book means a lot to me. The message is encapsulated in the title and connects with me on a deep level because it parallels the journey in my own life. So what is this book about? It's a description of how to build a nation. The reason I find this book useful is because I believe that nations are individuals multiplied. Which means when seeing a genuine success story of a whole nation and knowing that it was led by one man, whatever tactics he applied in building that nation are likely useful for individuals in their daily life. This book is actually a follow-up to this book, Singapore Story. As you can see, they're both pretty thick and heavy, but I enjoy the challenge of selecting a few of my favorite ideas from them. I've selected 3 key ideas, 3 things I love from these 2 books as personal takeaways. And the first idea is admiring and learning from the British. Lee Kuan Yew was born in 1923 in Singapore, when it was still a part of the British Empire. He grew up admiring his grandfather, who admired the British, as mentioned in the first book, Singapore Story. From his accounts of his journeys in the region, the British officers left him with a lasting impression of order, strength, and efficiency. And similarly, as a growing child in Rangoon, Burma, which was also a British colony, the opinions I heard from educated grown-ups, as well as my own grandmother, was about the colonial times being good times. And that was a complete contrast to what I remember being taught in school by the official military government about how bad and evil the British were. Of course, I understood that to be propaganda long before I read Lee Kuan Yew, but it was still nice to discover additional supporting evidence. And also, I like the fact that what his grandfather found desirable and admirable in the British was clearly defined in 3 simple words: order, strength, and efficiency. I have dozens of lines and passages saved from this book, and that was one of them. Now for my second personal takeaway, I'm moving on to the second book, which is assembled in 2 parts. Part 1, Getting the Basics Right. That's it. That's my second key takeaway. For the nation of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew wrote that the basics he had to get right were in the form of 3 pressing concerns. 1. To get international recognition for Singapore's new existence. 2. To establish a national defense force. 3. To create an economy out of thin air. He had to come up with a plan to find jobs for 1.7 million people sustainably. The general concept of getting the basics right is beautiful, because if the basics are right, then everything else is easier. Inversely, if the basics are not right, if the foundation is not secure, then everything else is more difficult. How I apply getting the basics right in my own life is shared in the previous video of this series. Takeaway 3. Seeing and describing things objectively and fairly. Being impartial in the most difficult times. Again, as a reminder, there are dozens of takeaways I treasure from this book. But my third takeaway is Lee Kuan Yew's impartiality. It's indicated all over both books. The example I'm going to pick to illustrate it is in the stories about the Japanese. Lee Kuan Yew was in Singapore during a hellish, horrific period in 1942 known as Suk Ching, a period during which the Japanese army randomly rounded up and murdered thousands of young Chinese men. He tells the chilling story of how he himself was targeted and narrowly escaped being sent to a firing squad on the beach. Once the Japanese lorded over us as conquerors, they soon demonstrated to their fellow Asiatics that they were more cruel, more brutal, unjust, and more vicious than the British. My third takeaway is that despite having all the reasons to harbor passionate hatred towards the Japanese, Lee Kuan Yew never loses impartiality. In spite of my experiences during the Japanese occupation and the Japanese traits I had learned to fear, I now respect and admire them. Their group solidarity, discipline, intelligence, industriousness, and willingness to sacrifice for their nation makes them a formidable and productive force. During his building of Singapore, he writes about actually admiring and learning from the Japanese, people that he once feared and hated. To me, this is the ultimate demonstration of an intelligent person: impartiality.